ZMY-ND11 gene disorder is often associated with verbal communication challenges for many, including my son Hawken. Speech delay or regression is one of the first warning signs of a developmental disability. Today, we are excited to learn from Dr. Kristina Johnson, a researcher focused on language and communication for individuals with complex neurodevelopmental disorders, particularly genetically driven neurodevelopmental disorders associated with minimal or absent speech. Dr. Johnson is also a parent of a child with a rare genetic disorder, MEF2C syndrome, who is non-speaking and autistic along with an intellectual disability. So we are so excited and welcome Dr. Kristina Johnson.
As Stephanie said, I'll be talking about the language and communication in individuals with complex neurodevelopmental differences. Here, let's see if no, we're just going to leave it here. If I look to the side, it's because I have two monitors up here and I don't want to switch them right now because of the weird glitch that just happened. So feel free if you want to leave questions in the chat as I'm talking. I'm really excited to talk to you and like answer the questions that you have. Some of the things that I share are going to be relevant to some of you, but not all of you. And that's okay. And I'm happy to kind of try to extrapolate and stretch and squash the things that I know and have learned over the years, and also the things that I don't know. And, you know, we can brainstorm together. That's how this works. So don't be shy about sharing and asking questions. And I'll try to get through this. And can you remind me how long I have? Or not? I'll try to get through this in about
I believe 40 minutes.
Okay, that's right. It's like 25 minutes, depending on how fast I talk here. So there should be time for Q&A at the end. But if not, I'm happy to chat with people offline. So again, I'll be chatting about language and communication for individuals with complex neurodevelopmental differences. And I want to start by explaining what that means to me and my space and how I define it. So it's kind of under this broad, somewhat vague umbrella of this kind of complex neurodevelopmental differences or disorders, and that includes individuals with autism spectrum disorder. But as we saw with Maria's video, that is not everyone, and not everyone kind of identifies under this umbrella. Most of the individuals that I work with have significant intellectual disabilities. Often they also have some genetic underpinning, right? Some genetic disorder or genetic variant or deletion or duplication that is affecting these things about their characteristics, the way that they live and act and move and interact in society. They also often have other neurological conditions. These things can include things like epilepsy or even cerebral palsy or other changes that are not grouped into these other categories. And I specifically work within a subset of all these different heterogeneous groups, meaning widely varying groups of individuals who are non or minimally speaking. And that is those individuals who have 0 to a few spoken words over the course of the lifetime, or like we heard in the last conversation, where there's often a regression early in life where those words are lost and never regained in that life. And very importantly, there are over 1 million individuals in the United States alone who fall into this kind of central purple stripe of this messy moth Venn diagram here. And I focus on this population because there is so little known about them. And they have many challenges that they're working to overcome. In particular, it's a small population. Even though there's plenty of people, you need to account for the rarity of the population and recruit broadly and acknowledge that you're never going to have the sample sizes that you would if you were looking across the entire population of individuals, even within a disorder. It's highly heterogeneous, meaning widely varying, like we just talked about. Also, these individuals are geographically distributed, meaning the way that we do our science, the way that we think about the questions that we can ask, we have to do it in a way that acknowledges that these individuals are around the world. If we want to get bigger numbers and more representative population, we actually have to design studies with the global population, or the you know, at least across the nation here in the United States, in mind. They're also generally low resourced, especially in terms of time and energy. This is really important for scientists and families alike to acknowledge, just like there is a limit. There's a limit that we all can do and we all can give. And I try to design my studies, and I encourage others to design their studies that works within the time and energy that these families have. Also, we lack very sensitive, meaning able to kind of tell the differences in development and track these milestones, or sometimes even inch stones, over time in the tests and assessments that exist right now. We also lack data sets, meaning if I wanted to share things with other researchers or other doctors, clinicians, things like that, I can't. They don't exist. They're either stuck inside of each of our labs, or they're just not designed in such a way that we can translate them across different studies. And that limits our growth here. Also, individuals in these populations frequently behave differently in a clinic setting or with strangers than they do in their homes and with their family members and people who know them really well, and we need to account for that. They also often possess powerful motivating interests, and these can either be like a frustrating thing that is a limiting factor, or it can be something that you can account for and build your study around, which is what we try to do. Also, all of these things require an approach that comes from multiple disciplines, meaning no one field, no one lab, no one person is going to be able to solve or tackle all of these things. There's no like magic bullet here. There is working together and collaborating across disciplines, which is something I love to do, to be able to kind of rising tides raise all ships, right? We all work together to kind of build the field up higher. So my approach actually starts, I'm actually trained as a physicist, and I really enjoy fundamental questions of nature. There I am building lots of experiments that have nothing to do with humans, but I'm interested in these fundamental questions of human nature now. How do we communicate? How do we interact? How do we grow and learn over time? And in particular, I'm interested in it for this population that I just described. And in order to do that, we actually need to get the data to ask these questions. And to do that, I often build devices or new tools and technology. I use computational methods like machine learning and deep learning, so now AI under that umbrella. I use wearable sensors and other types of signal processing to help us understand and get at these rich scientific questions. And importantly, none of this makes any sense. None of this really matters without the people. And as Stephanie mentioned in my introduction, I am the parent of a child with a very rare disorder called MEF2C, haploinsufficiency syndrome. When he was diagnosed, there were 7 known cases worldwide. So I really do understand what it is like to be without, in fact, it wasn't even called MEF2C when he was diagnosed. We just knew what chromosome, and they just kind of had a thought that maybe it was this gene. And he is now 14, and we've gone through a lot, and we've seen the field grow. There are now a few hundred cases worldwide, so still quite rare. But as genetic testing has evolved, and as our sort of acknowledgement of these different neurodevelopmental differences has evolved, we're seeing a lot more people get these diagnoses and come into these communities. We also benefit from things like social media and finding each other on Facebook and building these communities at that global level, which is really needed. So the people are at the heart of every question that I do, and I try to design my research studies such that it really addresses all 3 of these things at each step of the way. So one of the things that I ask is, how do these individuals communicate? Remember, I'm talking about individuals who have 0 to a few spoken words over the course of their lifetime. And really very little is known about that population and how do they communicate in their daily life? How do we measure it and track it over time? How do we help augment it or accelerate it or bring people together and enhance that communication exchange? And to narrow that question down a little bit, I actually start by asking, how do these individuals communicate vocally, like with the sounds of their voice? So we know that these individuals do communicate through many different means. And one of those is that non-speech vocalizations, things like babbles, grunts, yells, laughs, cries, all those things, all those sounds are some of the most organic, meaning just kind of natural, accessible. You don't need any extra tools or technology to get them, and universal. I have yet to meet a single individual who doesn't make some kind of sound. And importantly, these sounds are used to express emotions and needs and desires, and they're often well understood by family members or people who know that communicator well. However, they can be really difficult to understand for people who don't know the communicator well. Even somebody who maybe has an individual in their life who communicates in this way can struggle to understand the meaning or the function behind the sounds of an individual in a different family. So I'm just going to play now some examples of these, and often when I'm in person, this is a little bit more interactive and we raise hands and we make guesses and things like that. I'm just going to have you go ahead and listen because it's over Zoom. The first 3 sounds are all sounds made by an 18-year-old male, and each one has a different meaning. So as I play them, I want you to think, like, what do you think this sound means? and then we'll talk through them after I've played them. Hopefully you can hear my sound. So maybe just somebody who's got their video on, just like give me a wave or a thumbs up if you can hear this first sound. Here we go. Yes? Okay, great. All right, that's the first sound. So what do you think that sound means? That sound has meaning. It was given meaning by somebody who knows them and lives with their life and knows, has the whole context of them communicating in their daily life. And here's a different sound from the same individual. Okay, one more. All right. So again, usually, I query people. Let's see if anybody put it in the chat. Oh, I want. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So maybe there was some request in there, a yes sound, a no sound. Great guesses. Thank you, Disa, for participating. uh, so that's right. So the first sound was actually a frustrated sound from this individual. The second sound was a request sound. And the third sound was a sound that we have given the kind of title or encompassing category of called self-talk. So this is a sound often identified by parents that is made, it often is associated with a certain emotion, maybe kind of a positive or relaxed state, but it doesn't have an overt, like a really clear communicative meaning on the other side. I'm not trying to get you to do something or, exchange something with you, but you might know what it means. Okay, so let's do the next one. What I hope you're taking away from this is the idea that, first of all, there were 3 different sounds there. And those 3 different sounds had different meaning. So now I'm going to play 3 different sounds from a different individual. This is a 9-year-old male. And, whoops. All right, that's number 1. Number 2. Number 3. So just to spare this, they're happy. Look at this. Thank you, Disa. Excellent participation. Just to spare the suspense, yes. So again, there are 3 different sounds here. They have different. You can hear that they're different, right? But what they mean might be obvious sometimes and confusing other times. So in this case, again, that first sound was a frustrated sound. The second sound was a request sound. And that third sound was, again, that sort of meaningful but not meant for you kind of self-talk sound. We'll do one more and then we'll move on. There we go. Number 2. Number 3. So again, this is an 11-year-old female, completely different individual. And hopefully what you're hearing is like, okay, first of all, there are different sounds here. Second of all, they have different meanings. Third of all, there might be some similarities within and across individuals on these different sounds that we could use machine learning or AI to help us understand. So again, in just a spoiler, there was frustration, request, and self-talk again for this individual. And this is not a new phenomenon that I, created out of the ether. This is something that I'd seen and heard from parents over the years, including in my own life with a non-speaking individual. This is an example from Phelan-McDermott syndrome, which is a variation or a deletion on the SHANK3 gene, where this is an interview off of the internet. These are captions that came with the interview. It's actually a fantastic channel. If you've never seen it before, Special Books by Special Kids, highly recommend you check out that YouTube channel, where the mom is saying he has certain sounds that we understand what he means when he says them at home. And so this was kind of the, broader inspiration between the idea of vocally responsive augmentative technology, where the individual could vocalize in their daily life, and we can capture that audio clips in real time, and we can get that information labeled with the meaning or function by the caregivers, by people who know and understand them well and have access to all the context of the situation, right? I'm really confident you're asking for something because you're handing me a banana right now, right? Like that's a request sound. But then we can kind of strip away that context and use machine learning. The book was called Special Books by Special Kids. It's actually a misnomer because it's a video channel, but SBSK is what you're looking for. So we can use those sounds then, once we have enough of them in their labels, to build personalized machine learning models, and we can ideally send them back to new communication partners. Now, the parents don't need this, right? Like this, they live it, they know these things, but 1 degree away from that, grandparents, new caregivers, new therapists, new teachers, maybe even a couple degrees away from that, things like people in the community or, someone coming to your door might be able to help advance that communicative exchange by sharing Sorry, I have to turn off the chat because I can't read it when talk. Advance that communicative chain exchange if they knew what those sounds meant. And so we also hope, ideally, that it's not just sent to the communication partners, but then also sent back to the individual to help expand their own communication. Hey, look, I already made a sound that was a request sound. Let's pull up your AAC or your augmentative and alternative communication device and get you to that next page. I know you're in the kitchen. Let's pull up things that you might be requesting to eat. So I actually built, along with a collaborator of mine, Jaya Narain, while I was at MIT, this kind of process of collecting data in the real world. And our original version was all during COVID. And we used microphones attached to individuals' clothings using the Pell magnets and a smartphone app that we built that allowed caregivers to give us this information. What did that sound mean? Right? Capture the sounds and give us the sounds in real time, which was really important at getting at all of those challenges that I mentioned before, right? How do we make this fit in your daily life? How do we get these real sounds that you make and the real meanings behind them and do it across, geographic domains? We also really focus on ways to support this remote real world data collection, which is really a critical foundation of this and something that I'm hoping more people will take on, even though it's an extra layer of work to some degree, but we get actually much more engagement and in some ways maybe better data by doing this, where we built an entire system of what's called multimodal support. So things like we have a website, we have a YouTube playlist, we have this social story that the individual themselves can watch. We mail everything to the participants. We meet with them over Zoom. And what results out of that is we get these little segments of sounds, the ones that you heard earlier in the talk. And even if we just look at this from a signal level, right? Like this is just an audio clip being played, like music that you've maybe seen in, your music app or something. You can see the differences in these types of sounds. Now, of course, they're not all this pretty, and these are just like two examples of one sound from one individual. But you can imagine that there's a lot of rich science that we can understand. There's a lot of ways of maybe building this into biomarkers and measurement tools over time, and also hopefully, again, that augmentative technology. So I'm kind of going to buzz over the side, but we were able to share over 7,000 of these vocalizations with their meanings, right? With like, that's a request, that's a frustration sound from 8 different individuals, and able to share this open access online. And we're continuing to build on this type of data. So one of the things that I showed was like we started out with this lapel magnet or this lapel microphone where we were attaching it to people's shirts, and we realized every single time we did this that we could get better and kind of build more comprehensive personalized augmentative communication systems. So this is actually like the 5th generation of where we got on this project, where we actually are now capturing the sounds in real time using a phone, where you can review the sounds on the phone itself, and then they're sent and they're removed of their like identifying information. So we get what are called de-identified sounds on our web server, right? Our backend. And then we can use those to build these personalized machine learning models and send them back to the same phone and say, okay, now in real time, can we capture one of these sounds and share what it means with a new communication partner? Again, not the parents or caregivers, but somebody beyond that who maybe doesn't know the communicator as well, so that we can enhance this communicative exchange. And I want to add, so I have an example here that I'll play of my own son. This is actually around Christmas time. I was just kind of testing the app to see if it was working and doing some screen recording so that I could, share them in a talk. And I noticed he was making this sound that for him is a very dysregulated sound. It means he's having a hard day. He's bored. This is again Christmas vacation. All of our routines are off, and he makes this sound go over and over. And you're going to hear those sounds as well as some other sounds. Again, this is a real world recording. So you're going to hear like a slurping sound because he's chewing on a chewy device and he's got his favorite like music toy next to him. And I heard these sounds and I decided to capture it and see if it could classify it. And then while I'm listening to this, or while I'm like sitting next to him recording the sound, I hear the sounds in his voice change. And I know what they mean, or at least like I think I know what they mean, because we hear them all the time. And I want you to kind of see if you hear the sounds, and then you can see where we use the tool to see if it also can pick up and classify these different sounds. So here we go. That's the sound. That's that dysregulated sound that he makes, and it correctly classifies that. And this is where I hear the sound change. You hear it? So now I'm waiting for him to do it again. And this is one of his favorite music toys in the background. So here he goes. He's changed the sound. I'm capturing it on the app. And now correctly classifies it as the self-talk sound, right? Which for me, these are two opposite sounds. One's a not great sound, like we need to change our environment, we need to mix things up, we need to get some food, we need to change the music, etc. The other one is like, all right, we're ready to play. This is our relaxing sound. We can engage, we can really examine, and have fun together, new ideas. And if you want more of these samples, there's a little TV segment that actually has Felix and me using the app in real time on this website. But one of the things that I want to share is like, this sounds kind of fancy and fun, and it's this like personalized translation thing that, again, it can't translate. It can only do the ones that you, the parent, has kind of given us that information for. But just listening to the sound. So if we take these sounds and we put them in folders and we just play them for you, this actually seems to be, and we're testing this right now, a really important and easy way of just acknowledging that these sounds have meaning, that they exist and are different, similar to the game we played earlier, listening to these sounds, and that you can respond to them just like you would in everyday life with any other individual. So I'm gonna quickly buzz through another study. So again, my big question is, how do these individuals communicate? How do we track and understand this over time? How do we augment and enhance this? But we know that communication is not just these vocal sounds. And again, many of you may have individuals who have spoken words and are able to communicate verbally. We know that communication is multimodal, right? It includes things like vocalizations, but it also includes gestures. It also includes, body movements and this kiddo picking a banana and then throwing it away and explaining to you like, you thought I wanted it, but actually I didn't want the banana. It includes like kind of big body movements, as well as, twisting behaviors and arm movements, as well as facial expressions and looking patterns, and other hand movements like sign language and tapping and stroking and AAC devices. So how do we capture this? And I'm happy to take more questions on sort of why we did this in the order that we did in terms of these studies. There's a method behind all this madness. So this became the Roscoe study, which is a new natural communication sample. So this is a thing that exists in the field where we're trying to get a natural language sample, some snapshot of how you communicate in your daily life. But usually they're built around verbal language or around the idea that I'm going to give you an activity or a thing to do, and you're going to follow my directions. And from a lot of the individuals that I work with, that is not the case. And so this is designed specifically for this population, where it's 15 minutes. It's a snapshot of how they communicate in daily life, and it's all done over Zoom. But the individual isn't communicating with me over Zoom. They're communicating with their parent. And we really set up the environment so that we're capturing this like moment of how they communicate in daily life. It was developed over a year and a half iteratively with families that involves 4 activities that are highly personalizable yet generalizable. So we have a snack-based activity. Everybody eats. They all eat different things. They eat in different ways. They talk about the way they're eating in different ways, but they have some sort of mealtime activity. We have a free play activity that, again, we prep in advance. What are we going to do for 5 minutes? How are we going to do it in this room? How are we going to capture that communication? We have a couple of other activities that are designed around allowing for spontaneous communication, like bubble blowing, and a video that we get that we know the child loves, and then we evilly make it look like it's buffering a couple of different times to mimic that real world experience that we've all had, where the Wi-Fi isn't very good in the doctor's waiting office, and you've got a lot of communication there on looking to help fix it. We get multiple camera angles, so we get it all in one take. Like I said, the researcher is off camera and muted. This is not an interaction between a researcher on Zoom. It is an interaction between a parent or a child and a caregiver, including adult children. And it's got all this kind of synchronized data, which is really important for our analysis. It's also really importantly labeled by both researchers. We can do this in kind of the traditional way, but an entire new domain that's labeled and given information from the caregivers. And I'll go into that in just a few minutes. And again, I want to highlight the ways that we've tried to focus on making it accessible for families, and really like recognizing that every family that comes in is taking time and energy out of their day to be with us and to share their experience and their, communication, both the individual, the communicator, and the caregivers, and the infrastructure. So everything is designed. We have these booklets, we have everything color coded, we lots of pages on how to work Android phones. If you're an iPhone user, this is probably the hardest part of the study. We ship everything and pay for it to be shipped back. And this is really important in making this type of study feasible. And we've been really lucky that, in our pilot studies and the things that we've been doing for the last year and a half, we've had 100% successful completion of the study. So this is just a screenshot of these 3 different camera angles of an individual who's, communicating and doing this bubble blowing task in their living room. So we get all these angles. They can freely move about the room. We try to keep them in the room, but they try to match that naturalistic versus what we need for our science questions. And we have really been lucky to make sure that the data are really useful, right? So we're not losing data from the time and energy that the families have put in. And then after this, we actually have built a structured interview where the parent or the caregiver and myself re-watch the Roscoe sessions, so these 15-minute sessions, using the screen share feature, the thing I'm using right now on Zoom, where we're trying to turn caregivers into communication scientists in about 5 minutes. So following this kind of script, we pause the video every 10 seconds and we ask them to identify any communicative behaviors that they observed during those 10 seconds. And importantly, did their child do anything to communicate or send a message with them? What did they do? What did it mean? And whether we allow for them to be, confident or unsure, and really talk through these things that they often know intuitively, but maybe have never articulated. So really trying to find that marriage of the parent and caregiver knowledge and insight that they have from their lived experience, and the ways that we can do it with a carrier. And I will point out, so far, every single member of my population has been not able to self-report on their own communicative behaviors. However, that is something that we're hoping to get to, where the individuals themselves can share a little bit more about the ways that they're communicating in that time. But this is specifically designed for that kind of gap that we have right now in the population. So just to share a couple of quick examples, and then I'm almost done here. These are just samples of the types of communicative behaviors that we observe in Roscoe and how they're labeled or identified by family members. So this is an example of a requesting behavior. So she's tapping the table. And again, if I tell you that that's a requesting behavior, you might be like, oh, okay, yeah, she's asking for something. I get it. Here's an example from the same individual of a rejecting behavior. So she's saying no.
No, thank you.
And the parent identifies, we're pushing it away. That one's maybe a little bit more obvious, but there's a lot of things that the parent is just doing naturally in their experience with the individual. Here's an example of a comment.
Oh, you're good.
So the little girl goes, right? She's not saying any words, but the mom says she does this dozens of times a day. She really likes her to, what she's asking for is to say, did you see me? I put the teacup in the teapot. It went in. Let's talk about it. And now I'm going to take it out and we're going to put it in again. She's not asking for something specific, like an object or a behavior from the parent. She's just telling her about that day. Where did it go? It went in. And these are really important indications that again, even as somebody in this kind of population, wouldn't necessarily know what that meant. And here's one more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This is a great and beautiful example of a social interaction, and specifically kind of a shared affection, where she's just saying, I want you to know that I'm happy right now, right? I'm looking at you, I'm smiling at you, I'm giving you this moment to say, I'm having a great time. Thanks for being here, right? And those are really special moments, again, that we want to capture, and also moments that change developmentally over time. So this is just an example of the types of communicative behaviors that we capture in Roscoe. And you can see here across these 26 individuals, there's a lot of variation in how much they communicate, what types of communication and behaviors, what types of communicative behaviors that they use, like vocalizations and gestures and AAC. And this is still evolving as we try to get it into a state that we can use it to track this over time. We also can look at the same information, right? So this is the same data but here I'm coloring it by the different communicative functions, the way that they're using their communication. And these can kind of convey different things, and figuring out which one is the kind of most important thing, or the key things to look at as this development changes over time, will be a really exciting part. In addition, so the last few slides here are another part of my lab. So I'm jointly appointed in electrical and computer engineering, as well as communication sciences and disorders. I work broadly across these disciplines. Again, I did my postdoc at a neurology appointment, and I am kind of all over the place in terms of disciplines, but that allows us to be really flexible and agile in the ways that we approach the tools and technology for this population. So another thing that we do with the data from Roscoe, right, these are screenshots from Roscoe, is to build computational models of how these individuals are growing and developing over time, how they're using their behaviors and functions, and ideally, hopefully build out some of this augmentative technology, as well as be able to improve the ability to do this. Right now, this is a very time-intensive method. And so we want to be able to make it more scalable, make it be able to be used in clinics and more consistently across settings. And so we're also able to look at the ways that these individuals use their bodies. So here's an example of like across the population, how people are, this is like the head and the neck and the shoulders and the arms of all the individuals in the way that they're using gestures. And here you can tell for one individual, right, we have a lot of dominance on the left side of their body, and we can start to kind of quantitatively, right, meaning like really systematically with numbers that we can track over time, monitor that in the same way that we can look at their facial expressions and the way that they're using the muscles in their face to communicate these different things. Here's another example of the ways that we can understand it, where we can say, okay, like, how are you using gestures to record, like we're seeing that there's a lot of gestures to request and to use AAC technology. We're using gestures and AAC technology to request, as well as facial expressions and vocalizations to express emotions. You can see these kind of redder areas on this graph. Body movements are often used to express emotions or reject things. And looking behaviors, this is a nice kind of sanity check, like we're seeing looking patterns all across different forms of communication. All right, so this is my last slide, and it's an example of a parent. At the end of every Roscoe study, we ask, like, how do you think it went? Do you want anything to share? How well do you feel like it captured your child's communication in their daily life? And this mom not only shared a lovely response, but also did give me permission to share it with other families. So I'll just go ahead and play it, and then I'll be happy to take questions.
I think like the point I think you guys are getting at too, and I think the study is helpful, is like measuring communication. And because Emily forever on any scale will always show very minimal improvements, but being with her, like, we see the improvement in her communication, and it's hard to, how do you quantify that? So yeah, it's helpful. And then also, like, I think about people who like our family, like extended family, who don't spend a lot of time, like a day-to-day time with her, and they don't really like know how to communicate with her. Like they could be super awkward around her, and I'm like, she is communicating, like, but you have to like have the patience, and you have to listen, and you have to tune into her cues. And so unless you're someone, I think, who spent a lot of time with someone who doesn't speak, like, I don't think you have like that keen awareness. I don't know. It's a different human experience. It's having to like shut up and listen.
All right, so
I think like
there we go. So that is the end. I'm happy to, well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that this is a really big team effort, right? And we cannot do it without collaborations with family foundations and people who are, dedicated to helping us. And hopefully it feels very like collaborative, very synergistic. Again, one of the examples of a group that I work with is the Phelan-McDermott Syndrome Foundation. It's another genetic disorder group. There are hundreds of these groups around the world, and more growing every single day as the prevalence of genetic testing expands. And I'm just so thrilled that you guys are working together and helping each other. It's a really hard thing to do on your own, and it's as most things in life, right, it's important to have a village, to have your tribe, and help each other. So thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to share take any questions.
I'll kick it off with while everyone's pondering. So my biggest takeaway is that people that are minimally or, less verbally communicative do have a huge not language, like basically language, it's just not the language we all understand and know. And your research looks awesome. I anticipate an app someday for all these people that will open up a whole breadth of knowledge of perspective from the individuals that do have minimal communication. Are there ways to apply some of this in the current world? Like ways to, expand the knowledge of the communication of an individual that's minimally verbally communicate or uses language a little, with, the people that are in their expanded circles that aren't around them constantly. Is there probably not
Yeah,
easy
no,
to
I mean,
do
I
that.
think that's really a big goal of what we do. And I think one of the easiest, like the first level of that is simply acknowledgement. It's simply exactly what you're describing, like recognizing and just sort of realizing that you're recognizing that these individuals are communicating richly and expressively every day. And they're sharing something with you. I think so often both families and especially clinicians and researchers are waiting for them to speak. Right? They're waiting so much of our infrastructure, so many of our assessments, so many of the things that we're waiting for them to say words and then we can get going. And I think that is really a frustrating, limitation that we've placed on ourselves because these individuals are obviously communicating in their daily life every day. Like they are sharing many things. And so I think being aware that that's happening is the first and easiest step. And then of course, I think we can do a lot with technology to help augment that, right? To help expand on it, to share with the individual, right? To empower them to say, oh yeah, no, I heard you. They heard you. We know what you're saying. Let's keep going, right? Let's continue on this communicative exchange. And that's how we, in typical development for infants and toddlers and, in elementary, like as we go through development, that's how we grow. That's how we learn is saying, oh, did you see the dog? You did see the dog. Isn't it funny? That's a funny color for a dog. Our dog's white and that dog is orange, right? Or wow, they're running really fast or something, right? We share this kind of world with each other. And that I think is where we can help facilitate more of these developmental and communicative exchanges. And hopefully that also then enhances the development of the individual themselves, right? I think there's a really important level of empowerment and acknowledgement, though, that happens at the very beginning. And it can just the same way that you all found one another, right? It can lead to less of a feeling of isolation, more of a feeling of like, okay, I know what to do next. I know how to tackle this problem and overcome this communication breakdown, things like that. So that's what we're hoping for. It's baby steps though. Every single step of these things, right, takes a really long time. It's very slow. It's very expensive. It's very tedious, but exciting, right? We have a lot of opportunities for discovery in this process. And when might this app be available? Yeah, so I think the app is really right now a research tool. I would love to make it more accessible. We're kind of working towards that. Again, every single process requires some balance of like prioritization and what's gonna be the best and most helpful thing. So that is on the list. My infant is access. Yes, I believe I allowed for it to be recorded. Question. Macy Thompson. Sorry, it sounded like you had a.
Yeah, Macy, you can come off
Go ahead.
mute if you want to have a
Hi.
question.
Hi, yes. So my daughter is 11, and she currently has had issues with apraxia, and we are just now in the starting stages of getting the communication device. And I was just curious if you have seen improvement when utilizing the device with, such as like reading or whatnot. She does have words. She uses, I would say, like paraphrases instead of sentences. So I just don't want it to replace her speech. I was just seeing if you have seen improvement in that. And also her hearing, she failed her hearing test as an infant. And also she has failed several hearing tests after, with also a combination of passing. And her ENT at the last failed test had mentioned a more comprehensive hearing test. And I think it's more to check her understanding, her reception of speech. And due to it being comprehensive, I wasn't sure if you are familiar with that test and if there would be any knowledge gained or anything helpful after that test. I just didn't want to put her through a test that didn't have any significance to it.
Yeah. Oh, great questions. So first of all, on the AAC, on the getting a device, I'm a huge advocate for any sort of augmentative technology that that helps, or that gets to you. Our research shows that for most individuals, it does not have any impact. In fact, it can accelerate the ways that they're using vocal sounds and the ways that they're already communicating. And if for every individual, however, that is like a process that you go through, and you can work really closely with your speech language pathologist and then people sharing the device and lots of information online to help her find the right fit for that AAC device. So huge advocate there. I think, it is very likely to help many different domains of her day-to-day interactions. It's a process though. I will say a lot of people get it and are like, oh, great. Now they're going to tell me everything that's in their head. You're basically asking your child to learn a brand new language, right? Now, instead of communicating with the sounds that they use every day, they're becoming bilingual and having to say, okay, like here are ways that I communicate with you just like for the last 11 years. Now I'm going to translate that into these pictures or into these buttons, I want banana, please, right? It's like this totally different process. So I would just give yourself and your child like lots of patience, lots of grace on how it's being used. You're learning the language too, right? In the AAC usage, you're actually showing them, right, in the same way that they learned a lot of spoken speech, right, a lot of their communication just by being around you, that same things happen. So I think it's useful to think of it as becoming bilingual as opposed to a replacement for or an exact one-to-one match for the ways that they're communicating. Now, a lot of what we do is trying to say, okay, where are they communicating? How do we like enhance this thing that they're already doing as opposed to having them have to learn this other language? But this is still in its infancy, right? It's still in its early days. So yeah, I am excited for you to see where that goes, especially with apraxia. I think it often is a really nice benefit of being able to clarify some of the things that they know they're specifically saying or trying to say, but cannot, using the motor planning of their mouth and their jaw and their tongue and their breath and all these other things, get out. So to your other point on the hearing tests and things like that, I'm absolutely going to defer to the advice of your ENT. I probably would recommend the test because I think these are ways in which you learn things, especially if she's failed hearing tests in the past. There may be other things going on where she's simply not getting the input that she, could, getting the sound input. And that's an important way to look at it. I will also say that it's very difficult to do receptive language, what you're describing, that kind of comprehension. Are they understanding what I'm saying? Those tests are hard in anyone, but they're especially hard in complex neurodevelopmental differences because they are often based on things like when you hear a sound, you'll look towards it, right? And or when I call your name, you'll look up at me, and that is just often not the case, especially in autism. For my son, when they did that similar test when he was very young, he was only interested in the music toy that like there was a little bunny that like jumped up and down, so he would look at the bunny, but it had nothing to do with the sound. And it became a complicated balance of like, wait a second, is he responding to the sound or responding to the bunny? So I share this to help you understand, like, doctors, researchers, clinicians, we're not infallible, right? We don't have all the answers. We're trying our best every day. Like, we are pouring our absolute all into this. But like, no one person is going to be able to tell you all the answers. I wish it was so, but I think it's okay for you to say, oh, I think this is what's happening, or I've seen this experience in our own home, and really share that with the doctor. And if they say, oh, okay, that's a really useful piece of information, or even if they don't, it's probably a really useful piece of information, and really trusting yourself that you have a lot of knowledge here and you're bringing a lot to the equation, and that they might be learning from you, and it might be more of a conversation than them telling you, oh, here's what's gonna like solve this thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Can I ask a follow-up question about apraxia?
Yes, go ahead.
Our son also had apraxia, and we started doing prompt speech therapy, which included like tactile cues for motor planning. Is that something like, obviously I know you can go online and find that. What are your thoughts on prompt speech therapy and
Yeah.
using that as a tool for apraxia?
Yeah, I think a lot of these have really profound success for many individuals. Now, again, if it doesn't work for your individual, that's okay, right? There's a reason we give these statistics or we say words like many, right? Because every individual is different. This is true on like whether you respond to, Tylenol versus Aleve, or those are very US drug, but like, we just respond differently. I need a lot of protein in my diet. My brother is a vegan and like, does fine with that. Like, there's just a lot of differences in the human body and the ways that we experience. So prompt therapy has been really successful for a lot of individuals with apraxia. I think you should absolutely explore it. And then again, trust your gut, right? Is this something that is working for your family and for your individual, for your child? Keep going, right? If the therapist or the person you're working with is not the right fit, find another one. It's annoying, it's exhausting, I get it, but like, they're not God. They are not above you in terms of their knowledge of your child and how it's working. And if they say something that doesn't work, like, it is absolutely your right to be like, I disagree. However, of course, I encourage really strong critical thinking and openness and the scientific method and being aware that there is a lot of misinformation out there and trying really hard to like kind of think through the data that you're given and not lean into something that seems either one step like outlandish, this is going to solve everything, or this is the problem for everything. Usually not. And anything that is just kind of an overarching claim, right? So I think sounds like you're doing the right thing. And I would encourage you to keep going on each one of those things and add AAC, right? Prompt therapy can be done with other things. There's not a one size fits all. There's not a one therapy is best for each individual.
There's some long information in the chat if you want to kind of read and respond to those.
I don't know if I have time. Are we okay on time?
You can respond in the chat also if you want to stick around. I think we're almost at time. I did want to make a comment for both Macy and some people in the chat that my daughter also, we went down the apraxia, which seemed the most consistent with what her speech issues were, and we did get the AAC device. We never really used it for very long like an AAC device, but and someone mentioned kind of like playing or babbling. I feel like she does a whole lot of auditory stimming. Like, she loves that intake, and she would just sit there and do the same 2 words over and over and just sitting by herself. And I feel like that expanded her language, just being able to hear them on her own terms and listen. So we saw a huge growth in speech after she got the device, even though we never really used it for very long in the way that AAC devices are typically used.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of information. Sorry, Macy, you unmuted.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna ask, did you notice a difference in reading? Did it help with that? Because I know for her, it's more of memorization, especially with sight words. And I thought just seeing that word constantly would help. This is my little one, actually. Can you say hi?
About 4 when we did it, so she wasn't reading yet, but so it was all just pictures. So I'm not sure about that part, but yeah, our next speaker is here, and we want to thank you so much for joining us, and you're welcome to stick around, and we will have this presentation available to anyone who wants to rewatch it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to see everyone today, and it's such an engaged audience. So keep doing it, keep going. It's going to be okay. And it's really wonderful. Your kids see you and they know how much you are there for them. And that's, I think, a big part of this. So I will sign off, and I'll be in the background for maybe a few minutes, and then actually I have 2 children. They're with other people right now. So I will probably head in that direction, but thank you again.